Welcome to the Legally Sound Smart Business Show, your weekly look at legal news and questions in the business world. Here are your hosts, Nasser Pasha and Matt Staub.
All right, welcome to Legally Sound Smart Business. This is our first episode. My name is Nasser Pasha.
And my name is Matt Staub.
That was a little bit of delay, Matt.
Yeah, sorry.
Very, very good. We're still getting used to this podcast business. Anyway, welcome to the show. We will be going over business law related articles and in the news, as well as taking some of your questions. We already got a few ready for you today, but let's go with the news. What's going on in the news, Matt?
All right, let's jump into it. Saw an article here. Looks like Amazon's getting sued again. Actually, I think the first sentence of the article was, well, Amazon got sued again. So it seems like something that happens pretty frequently if you ever pay attention to the news. This one has to do with detaining some of their employees. I guess when they're coming in and out of work and then even leaving for lunch breaks, they're getting stopped for up to 25 minutes, having to go through a search.
Yeah, because they're stealing stuff probably.
Yeah, at first I was just really wondering why they were even doing this. But yeah, then it makes sense that they're, I guess, stealing stuff. So maybe it just has to do with hiring better people. I don't know. But
yeah. Well, speaking of being sued, if you're that big of a company, you have a target on your back, especially with employees. I'm not surprised.
Yeah, this seems like it's a big problem here. What do you think about it?
Well, yeah, if they're not being paid during that search time, and I think I read they're in the line for like 20, 25 minutes, that's a tough one because I know in California, and by the way, from what I'm looking at, these suits are going all over the country, not just this lawsuit. Mm-hmm. But in California, if you have dominion and control over your employee during that time, really, they should be on the clock. So I'd be concerned if I was Amazon. Yeah,
and I can't imagine that they're getting paid. I mean, I'm assuming it's closer to the minimum wage these workers would be. So it's like they'd be losing out on a ton of money just paying these people to go through the search, or waiting in line to go through these searches. I would just pay them for that time and move on because it looks like this guy sued for $50,000 in unpaid wages.
Compare that to the penalties that they'll get for not paying the wages rather than just pay it out for 20, 25 minutes or giving them a longer lunch break or something like that.
Yeah, this seems like a suit that'll settle and the attorneys representing them will get the bulk of it and the employees will get nothing.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Lawyers always win.
Yeah.
Of course. I use Amazon all the time. I didn't realize they were having a slave labor camp. I love ordering online because every time you order, I always forget what I order. So then I get a box and I feel like I'm getting a Christmas gift. So even if it's something simple, like I bought something for my cat, I bought a pet container holder. Not a pet container, a food pet container holder. I didn't put my pet in there. And I forgot what it was, but I was excited to get it. And I opened it. It was just a plastic container, but it was still exciting.
Well, whatever does it for you.
Yeah, that's what I like. Okay, let's go to our first question. We get questions all the time, and you can send your questions in to ask@legallysoundsmartbusiness.com. We can answer your question. But these answers, since this is our first episode, these questions are from our past and some that we get all the time. And we get some goofy ones and some fun ones, but we'll start out with those. What's our first question, Matt?
First question. Is it okay to force one of my employees in my store to work in the basement?
Don't say who the question's from because we're going to make these anonymous unless you tell us otherwise. But yeah, just to protect your
This one probably wants to remain anonymous, I'm guessing.
Okay, well, what's his question again?
Is it okay to force one of my employees in my store to work in the basement?
I don't understand. Like he wants to keep his employee as a slave or in his dungeon as a workplace or what?
Yeah, I mean, actually, my aunt and uncle were in town visiting this past weekend, and my aunt, she was telling me how her office, how none of the offices have windows, and I was just thinking, like, that's crazy. I mean, I would go crazy if I didn't have at least like a window to look through or any sort of light other than the light above me. But yeah, she doesn't work in a basement, but this is taking it to another level. Yeah, well,
welcome to the real world. I mean, most employees in the world don't have windows, let alone working in a place that has air conditioning or heating, which I assume this basement has, maybe not.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, it doesn't seem that big of a deal to me. It depends upon the type of employment, though, but I can see how it can drive someone crazy.
I feel like this is probably more common than you would think. If businesses are growing, you're just shuffling around people, cramming multiple people into offices, just kind of trying to find spots where people can work. I guess in this question, it would be dependent on, I'd want to see what kind of basement or like at least how it looked. It could be really nice or it could be a straight up dungeon, like you were saying. So,
well, no, that's a good point. If it's seriously a place where it's unsafe or unsanitary, then yeah, that might be an issue. But generally you can put your employees where you need them. It's an at-will employment most of the time. And so not really up to anyone besides the employer.
Yeah.
I would just tell the employee to toughen up. And the alternative is to not have him or her employed at all. That's the thing, right? I assume this person, this business owner, they don't have anywhere else to place them. Otherwise they would. And what's the alternative? To get a bigger space or to move? Yeah. And so that's not really feasible.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, so that's the answer for that question. How's that person going to know that we answered his question? It was kind of a while ago. We'll have to email him.
They're probably locked up in a basement right now anyway, so.
Yeah, okay. Well, that's not going to work. So that's for the audience's benefit.
Yeah.
All right, what do we got next? This is a good one.
It looks like there's a battle between Rocket Lawyer and LegalZoom. Two companies, well, Rocket Lawyer not so much, but I know I get asked about LegalZoom constantly. I'm pretty sure you do as well.
Yeah, well, Rocket Lawyer is a new one, right? LegalZoom we've all heard of.
Yeah.
In fact, they sponsor so many podcasts. Maybe they can sponsor ours. That'd be ironic. Or we'll have Rocket Lawyer do it. That'd be more interesting. But yeah, Rocket Lawyer, I was not as familiar with this. I don't know about you, Matt, but I looked them up. They're a startup, right? They're a startup in San Francisco, or at least they used to be. I think they've been around for a while now. But I think they do pretty much what LegalZoom does, right? Or no?
The person that told me about it was another attorney. And when I went to look at it, it looked like it was a lot of contracts. So you could just plug and chug, plug in your data, and it pumped out a contract, which, I mean, that's a whole nother topic. But I think they also do have a similar thing. I think LegalZoom has a lot more options, but I haven't really looked at either site that
I think
carefully.
In fact, I'm looking at their site. I think that Rocket Lawyer is more geared towards businesses, I think.
Yeah, that's a general impression I got. Because LegalZoom, you can do a bunch of things. I think you can even create like your own will on LegalZoom.
No, they have personal stuff at Rocket Lawyer too. Okay. I think the difference is that their pricing is like, it's $40 per month. So basically, you can replace your attorney for $40 per month. That's pretty good.
Yeah. All your problems are solved.
I'd go ahead and do that. Your problems are solved. In fact, I believe Microsoft is thinking about firing their in-house counsel and just going to rocketlawyer.com. Now, they're probably going to pay more than $40 per month, but seriously, what do you think about these do-it-yourself legal websites like Rocket Lawyer and LegalZoom?
I would say the majority of the time, it's just not sufficient. I mean, I can see a few instances where it would be okay, and there'd be other instances where you do something, you try to create your own stuff based on their templates, and you completely screw it up, but nothing ever happens to it from a legal perspective. But there's also all the instances, too, of people creating this stuff, just assuming it's right, which it might not be, and it probably isn't because it's not specifically tailored to your needs. And then you come back and get sued. So you try to save money up front, and then 6 months, a year, however much time down the road, ends up backfiring on you. And you should have just spent the money up front to actually have someone prepare the documents that you need, and you're paying for it long term.
I think you're right on that. I think in my experience, we've had clients that, for example, if they're forming an entity, sometimes that's not that big of a deal because once they come to you, you can pretty easily change it.
Yeah.
But the question is what if they don't ever go to a lawyer and they don't have time to fix it or tailor it to them? And I understand, especially on the business perspective, you have to bootstrap your business sometimes, and it can be the only alternative if you can't afford legal advice. But then at the same time, look, if you don't have enough capital to spend it on smart advice, then I'd rethink about your business too. So I'm mixed, honestly, because I can totally see a person that understands the law pretty well and is going to LegalZoom at a convenience. But, some people just think that I need a contract or I need an entity, and they just buy it online and now they think they're covered.
Yeah.
When obviously, we're lawyers, so we're going to see, oh yeah, by the way, did we mention that we're attorneys? I forgot to mention that. Yeah, we're licensed attorneys in California. That's what I would say my issue is sometimes people just think they need something and they don't end up actually using it effectively.
One last thing about LegalZoom, what I like is some people are like, oh, well, they have Robert Shapiro, so it's a great company. It's like, yeah, I get what he did, O.J. Simpson, yeah, but it's just like he's into commercials, and that's not something that, I mean, if I was a client or potential client, I want to like hang my hat on that. It's like, oh, well, Robert Shapiro's name's involved in this, so it must be legit. I'm sure he prepares every individual thing that goes through there.
I'm sure the documents are fine.
Oh yeah,
the documents are probably fine, but are they fine for you or for the business owner or whatever?
Right.
I don't know if that's true.
Right.
But they do say though that if you need legal advice, they can refer you to an attorney. And this is where I get a little annoyed because basically these attorneys, a lot of times they have pre-negotiated rates, usually much lower than the market, which is again good for businesses that are on a budget. But then keep in mind that you're working with attorneys that are, instead of being paid their regular hourly rate, are willing to work at a lower hourly rate. And I'm just wondering what kind of quality response you're going to be getting from that.
Right.
It's just like with anything. Just how much, you get what you pay for.
Yeah, I agree.
We can bash LegalZoom and Rocket Lawyer all day, but we didn't even get to the article. What was the article about with the lawsuit?
Basically, the lawsuit was over. Rocket Lawyer was advertising that we offer the same sort of thing as LegalZoom. LegalZoom, it costs, I believe LegalZoom charges $99. Rocket Lawyer, we're free. It's okay.
So basically it's a false ad claim, right?
Yeah,
They're
exactly.
saying that it's deceiving. I don't know. What do you think? The court ruled, right? They said, well, Rocket Lawyer has a free trial. So therefore the quote that says Zoom charges $99 and we're free is not deceiving. I don't know. What do you think?
It is pretty misleading if at the end of the day, if it's actually not free and you're saying it's free, I think that's misleading.
I think so too. You know what? I just realized this court action is just a motion for summary judgment, which means, not to get into the legalese of it, which means that the court actually hasn't addressed the full merits of whether it's deceiving or not. Right. They just reviewed whether or not they should just throw the case out altogether because I don't know how to put it in layman's terms, but basically preliminary, just throw it out before the facts can be vetted.
Right. There's still a long way to go. This was just one of the first steps, and it got over the first hurdle, and there's still a long way to go. Yeah,
I would say LegalZoom might come ahead on this. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, if you're advertising that it's free and it's actually not, I would think that LegalZoom would end up coming out ahead on it, but it could be another thing that just settles out. I don't know.
Yeah. All right. We spent about an hour on that article, so our time's over. No, not really. But okay, let's go to the next question of the day.
Okay. This is another question that I get asked a bunch, and it's really broad. I get asked it in a bunch of different ways too. But generally speaking, at what point should I set up an LLC for my business? It seems like LLCs are, I guess they're still relatively new, kind of, but it's like the new hot item that everybody wants. That's like the first thing. Anytime someone wants to start a business, it's LLC is the first thing that seems like it comes out of their mouth. And
yeah, I like it. At what point? Probably the most general question you can ask. At what point should I set up my LLC? You're right. We get this all the time.
First of all, I don't think people even understand what an LLC is or what the benefits are. They just, it's usually,
what does LLC stand for, Matt? Test question.
I don't know. It's a limited liability company. And
nice.
The limited liability part, I think, is something that's commonly misunderstood. They just assume that, if I have this limited liability, I can never be sued, which isn't true at all. Basically, as long as you're doing everything correctly and adhering to the formalities of how you set it up, your personal assets would be okay, but you can still be sued.
You can still be sued no matter what. Anyone can sue anyone. And we say that all the time. I'm sure many people have heard that.
Mm-hmm.
Also, they assume that, you already touched on this, they assume that they need an LLC.
Yeah.
And maybe they do, but maybe they don't. And I think the assumption is poor because there's so many other factors. And maybe for small companies, 7 out of 10 times an LLC is appropriate. But when you have more complicated partnership structure, or you have some capital investment, or if you're buying real estate, or if you have control issues and so forth, there's about so many different other ways to set this up that may be more beneficial.
Yeah.
I think they're asking also, at what point of your business should you set one up? When do you do that?
It kind of depends on what they're looking for from the LLC. I mean, for example, I was talking to someone, I won't say what business he was in, but he was doing something completely legal, but something with websites. And
that's good.
He's like, oh, I need to set up an LLC. And I asked him, I was like, well, why do you want to set it up? And he's like, I don't know. I was like, honest. And I knew this person didn't have a lot of I was like, what personal assets do you have? And he's like, well, really nothing. I was like, and then what are you afraid of them coming after? If they sue you and they win, your business and personal assets are the same. They're both nothing. So I think in some instances, it would be fine not even to set it up in the first place in that sort of situation.
Yeah, you could always insure against it too. Like if, even if you have a small number of assets, you can just get business insurance and cover most of the big time liabilities. Obviously, you don't want to go bankrupt over something silly, so you can just insure against it.
Yeah.
But also, I think as far as what point in if you plan on forming an entity, and, again, Matt and I just talked about an instance where it's, I think, unique. Almost always you want to operate under an entity. You don't want to expose your personal assets, assuming you have any.
Right.
But you should do it as soon as possible, really. I mean, there's really no reason to delay, especially before you sign your first contract. Even if you sign your lease with a personal guarantee, for example, you should still do it under your entity, and you personally guarantee as an individual. But that needs to be set up right away. I mean, there's just so many reasons, and you just need to make sure you're protected personally. And it's much more difficult to change that later once you've signed a contract under your individual name.
I think you nailed it. Once you start conducting business with that name, that's the point right there, probably.
Either that, or sometimes people sign a contract before they conduct business. So whatever's earlier.
Yeah.
Very good. All right. What do we got next?
This is a pretty unique thing in the sports business world. Arian Foster.
Who's Arian Foster?
Arian Foster, the running back for the Houston Texans, or at least for this season.
Oh, okay. I watch football. I don't know him though.
I know. We went to a game last year.
I know. Yeah.
That was college, though. This is professional.
Oh, that was college. Yeah. I was trying to think what game we went to last year. That's how memorable it was.
So there's this company, Fantex, is paying Foster $10 million for 20% equity in his future income. So that's going to be contracts he signs, endorsements, other business revenue. Apparently, it's completely legal. I mean, have you heard about this? I mean, what do you think? It's a really weird situation, kind of.
To me, this is crazy. And basically, they're going public with the income as somehow it's some kind of business. And I'm sure Arian Foster has some kind of entity and that's holding all this with the contracts and so forth. But then they're taking this 20% and reselling it on the open market. I don't know. This seems really weird to me. I'm surprised that, I mean, I've looked at it. They have all the SEC filings. They have the prospectus out there. I even read how it has the details of the contract. The NFL can fire him at any time. This is a high risk venture, et cetera, et cetera. But, usually when you have something in the public stock exchange, it's for injecting capital into a business. Where is the business here? I don't get it.
Yeah. I mean, they talk about, I forget the statistics, but 95% of restaurants fail. If this trend continues, I mean, this is I can see like 99% of these people that invest in this failing, just because NFL running backs are the biggest turnover in sports, probably.
I've heard that too. They always get injured, right? And they don't last too long.
Yeah, the shelf life and granted, Arian Foster's a good running back, but I think the shelf life is like 3 years in the NFL for a running back. I mean, he's already surpassed that, but they age very quickly. And I know he just signed a big deal last year for $43 million or whatever it was. So, but he could just be out of the league completely here. And the thing about the NFL is that contracts aren't guaranteed. Some of the money can be guaranteed, but you can just cut a guy and then it's over. And then the people that invested in this are just kind of sitting there. There's so many other things to invest in. This seems like a bad investment.
What if he gets injured? Do these guys usually get paid while they're injured?
Yeah, I think if they get injured, I think they still get paid. But NFL, you can just cut players whenever you want, I believe. And then they just stop getting paid. There's some guaranteed
unless
money.
They have a contract or something.
Yeah.
Would you ever invest in something like this?
No.
And by the way, this is not investment advice. Definitely not. But would you say no?
No, I mean, I don't play fantasy sports either, but I would much rather pay money to play a fantasy football league than I would to invest in like real players. in this sort
well,
of.
you know, if this gets any traction, that's where it's headed, right? I mean, this is going to replace fantasy football, or it's going to be some kind of conjunction thereof, right?
Yeah,
You're going to be buying and selling players.
I don't see it working out, but
I don't think the SEC is going to approve this in the long run. The player doesn't have any incentive to, I guess they do have an incentive to grow his so-called NFL brand business, but it just seems as though it's just so high risk, and there's no, first of all, there's no benefit to society. What's like, there's just money changing hands. There's no production of anything. It's just a player.
yeah.
I don't know. I guess I'm cynical. Anyway, all right, let's go to, I'll take this one. I found this. This is an article. It's a blog, and it's not fair because this is kind of a low-hanging fruit with, I should say, a straw man argument. But this is a blog article that says how to write a contract. And I was thinking like, okay, maybe this is some kind of legal article. Nope, this is some freelancer. I think he's some kind of web designer or something like that. Wrote a blog on how to write a contract. So I thought it was interesting.
Like you were saying, this is how to make a contract. Step 1, start with a Google search. All right, well, that's a good start. I guess you just type in you type in contract in Google and press I'm feeling lucky and see what pops up. I don't know.
Yeah, no, you search how to write a contract and this article will pop up. So we've already done the first job. First step, we're done.
So start with Google search. Step 2, build your own contract. All right, well, it seems easy enough.
It tells you to look for different templates and copy and paste into a new document, changing the wording where necessary.
Okay, so we're off to a good start. Step 3 is review your contract and edit. So it says go through every line. I mean, seems like that's important. Use the right terminology.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
Example, if you are a writer, call yourself a writer in the contract, not a painter. Like, I mean,
capitalize, not a painter. That's true.
I didn't even think about that. I shouldn't be calling myself a painter.
Oh man, that's funny. Step 4. Oh, this is the best one.
Yeah, it is. Go ahead.
Choose a state for future litigation.
Just the way that's worded is just assuming that you're eventually going to get sued over this contract. And for anyone that's never been involved in a lawsuit before, they're very expensive. So money you could have spent on actually having an attorney draft this contract is going to be well worth the amount of money you're going to spend down the road. When you get sued, at least you're going to choose what state you're going to get sued in. So pick a good one.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
How are they supposed to know too? Like, I live in California. If I get sued, I want to be able to travel to Hawaii. So let's choose Hawaii.
I like that. Yeah. That's what I'm going to start recommending.
What's step 5? Include a payment plan? This seems to be the most obvious, but do not leave out a clause stating your rate, when it will be paid and how. Oh, man.
Assuming this is a contract for services, I feel like that should be the starting point. Like, I don't know choosing a state for your future litigation should be decided before, like, how you're going to get paid. I mean, it's kind of what I'm assuming the contract's kind of built around is the payment. And I don't know, we could go about this forever.
I've seen a lot of contracts post it being executed where both parties aren't represented. And especially with some of the complex transactions, contracts can get pretty big. And so they just use old contracts that they used before or whatever. And it causes so much problems. People have no idea cleaning up this mess, especially if there's any kind of dispute, because a lot of times there'll be inconsistent clauses that don't match. And now no one knows what the actual terms of the agreement is, and each party has their own understanding. It's just a mess. But I don't know. I thought this article was funny because it's, just do a Google search and it'll fix all your problems.
Yeah.
But okay. So it looks like we're out of time, but this was fun.
Yeah. I think it went well. We basically just made fun of LegalZoom for 30 minutes, but other than that.
Yeah. That was fun. We should just, that should be our weekly podcast, is making fun of LegalZoom.
Yeah.
That'll be interesting. And then they can sponsor us too.
And
Rocket Lawyer can sponsor us.
Yeah. And then we set up a company where people can invest in us, and kind of like the Arian Foster model. That's
perfect. I think that's a great idea. Not as high risk. We're not running backs.
Yeah, that's true.
Anyway. All right. Well, thank you guys for listening to our first episode 1. Hear us next week when we go over some of your questions that you can send in to ask@legallysoundsmartbusiness.com. I'll see you guys later.
Oh, bye, guys.
This has been the Legally Sound Smart Business Show with your hosts, Nasser Pasha and Matt Staub. The Legally Sound Smart Business Show is your weekly look at legal news and questions in the business world. Legally Sound Smart Business is a podcast that is intended but not promised or guaranteed to be current, complete, or up to date, and should in no way be taken as an indication of future results. No attorney-client relationship is created by listening or submitting questions to the podcast. The podcast does not constitute legal advice, but rather is offered only for general informational and educational purposes. You should not act or rely on any information in the podcast without first seeking the advice of an attorney. The opinions expressed in the podcast reflect the views of those individuals and do not necessarily represent the views of any other individual or business. For more information about the Legally Sound Smart Business Show, visit legallysoundsmartbusiness.com.